Wait, what? Hello, interwebs! I hope you are all doing well because I am here to review the latest episode of Doctor Who. This one, Series 2, I'm calling it Series 2 in quotation marks, Episode 3, titled The Well. I will be right up front and say I am going to stay spoiler-free for the first few minutes of this, but there is going to be a particular point in the discussion about this episode where I am going to tip into full spoilers because I'm going to have to talk about a major thing that is revealed this episode. So I'll try and give a reveal for that, but a lot of my talking points are going to come down to that, so we're going to get into it rather quickly. So just going to put that right up front here. What I will say, though, is I was really looking forward to this episode. These are my favorite kind of Doctor Who episodes, the horror episode that we generally get one of per season. Not always, sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less, but we always generally get one. Last year, it was, 73 yards, I think was the number, and I thought that one was excellent. And even before that, we got Wild Blue Yonder in the three specials, and I thought that one was also the best of the three specials, in my opinion. Though, again, I'm biased. These are the types of episodes that I really enjoy. And certainly, there's been many throughout Doctor Who's ages, Blink, Midnight, stuff like that. So I was really looking forward to this one. Like, I think they're just some of the most seminal Doctor Who stories, generally speaking, and just a taste that I liked. So, going into this one, I will say I do have higher than most expectations for a Doctor Who episode of this style. That being said, I came out of this one enjoying it. I think there are some really great paranoia moments that I absolutely loved, but I do end up feeling that this episode makes some direct comparisons to some other episodes of this show, and in doing so, I think it doesn't hold up as well. And also, I feel like a lot of there's a few conveniences and a few things, especially the ending, get really rushed and don't allow us to sit in what is the actual heart of this episode, which is the paranoia of it. And I think there's some really good moments of paranoia in here that I absolutely was gobbling up, but I think that the show kind of just skips over it really quickly and doesn't let us sit in it very well. And especially because the character types are of the the supporting cast of this episode are so broad, and a couple of them are very frustrating and annoying, that it was hard for me to get into them. That being said, there are some great moments for both Belinda and especially the Doctor in this episode that I really liked, and there is one of the supporting cast this episode that I absolutely adored. Alice. Alice was fantastic. So, getting into the nitty-gritty of it, let's start off. I do think the opening scene with the Doctor and Belinda talking, basically coming right out of last episode and talking about, why can't we go back to Earth, it just felt like a weird beat to come in on. I like the idea that we're starting every episode at the end of the previous one. I would love that for this entire season. I don't know if they'll keep that up, but if this entire season is just literally back to back to back to back, it will make the big finish in Doctor Who novels difficult to find places to slot into if we don't continue on with Belinda after this season, for them to have this Doctor companion dynamic. But I would actually just love that as just an interesting experiment for Doctor Who to try for an entire season, because we haven't really gotten that. So I do like that, but the conversation just felt a little bit reiterative and just felt very oh, okay, I guess this is where we're starting in the episode. I do like that it ended up with the Doctor promising her to bring her back, which kind of goes to some of the stuff, that emotional weight that we get at the end of the episode, and it doesn't feel as so directly foreshadowing that of stuff that we will, like last episode where the Doctor sort of not mentioning that he was the last of the Time Lords comes up at another beat later on in the episode. Like here, it's not so one-to-one, and I kind of like that it's more of a subtle backgrounding to the final decision that the Doctor kind of makes here. But ultimately, the scene, a little bit weird. It's just a weird jump-in point for the episode, I feel like. It is also weird to me that they decide to reuse the same exact shot of them changing into the current era outfits. Not only is it the second time they've used it this season, it's the third time they've used it overall, because they did a similar thing in series 1 with the Doctor and Ruby. I think it was for the Devil's Court. I think that was the episode they used it for. But it was a very similar shot. If I don't know how I feel about it if like every episode they end up just doing that same shot over and over and over again, it becomes just a season-long thing that they do. Maybe it'll circle back around for me as being like, all right, if they keep using it, maybe it'll circle back around to be like, all right, it's just a thing you're doing now. If they only do it this episode and last episode and then reiterate, and it's already reiterated from series 1, I will sort of be like, that feels just lazy, if I'm being frank about it. But if they overuse it, I feel like it'll land better for me, I guess is what I'm kind of going for there. That also being said, so we're talking about the uniforms, it's a nitpick. I know it's a nitpick. Most people aren't going to care, but I think a lot of people are going to have this nit to pick, which is, why do they have the exact right uniforms that fit the exact helmets that they get when they come out of the ship? It felt so convenient. It just wildly so, especially since they walk out, and I know that the people line up next to them or whatever, but they have the exact right number of helmets for all of their team, plus the 2 for Doctor and Belinda. It felt way too convenient. At the end of the day, it's just an excuse to get them on the planet and needing time to get before the ship will come back up for them. I get it. It's fine. It's a convenience for convenience sake to have like a big opener, but it's just such an unnecessary one. There are other ways I feel like you could have done that. It felt a little bit lazy, if I'm being frank. You could have gotten there without these sort of shortcuts. If I'm being frank, it doesn't end the thing for me. It's a nitpick. But it does feel like, all right, you could have spent a little bit more time on that to make it not so overtly convenient. Let's talk about the crew, and then I'm going to get to the big sort of discussion point of the episode. I do like the leader of the group. I like how she's kind of built up. She seems to be at first the sort of military type. She has that line, "Hope is irrelevant." She seems like very much on track. But we do get like little shades of her growing up and like how she joined this military group. However, without going too into it too much in the spoilers, the end of the episode really heavily tries to land her emotional beat that we get with her to like really heavily on the small bits of information that we get with her. And while I liked her performance and I like the information that we get, none of it was terribly emotional. So the big beat we get at the end of the episode with her, again, I'll try and stay vaguely spoiler free before I get to the big spoiler, but if you've seen the episode, you know what I'm talking about, the big beat with her. It just felt it was like really trying to lay that on in a way that didn't feel like it fully felt like I was emotional, like it had been, like it felt like it was putting a lot of emotion in a thing that didn't feel very emotional. It's like, yeah, that's the thing that I know about her character, but it doesn't exactly feel weighty in a way that I think the show wanted me to feel the weight of it. I'll reiterate this point a little bit when we get to that point in this review, but I'll bring it up here. Also, we get Trooper number 1, who is the only other trooper that we meet here. I mean, there's a few other troopers. I believe there's the trooper who sort of helps Belinda out as a nurse. She's good. She doesn't get a lot, but the actress brings a lot of compassion to the character role. I really liked her just based on performance. There's not a lot in the writing, but her performance is great, and I thought very empathetic. Trooper 1, though, Jesus Christ, is he so annoyingly one note, and I was like, dude, get another character trait besides being obstinate. I was very much annoyed by him right from the get-go, and you could already tell where his character was going to go. I just got very frustrated with him so quickly. I'm already kind of dancing around too many spoilers, so let me just give the big spoiler warning here. Big spoiler warning here, just putting it right at this moment. But we then get into the mining colony. Why in the world would the Doctor and Belinda take off the suits? Like, as soon as they took them off, I immediately knew it was like, okay, that's going to be a problem down the line, that they're taking this off. It would have been one thing if they'd just taken it off so the Doctor could not have to wear it the whole time. I get that that's part of it, but then it became an obvious plot thing, and I'm just like, why? It's just so obviously that they took off the uniforms that they would have to be the last ones to go get off, and we'd have the characters that we needed to have the characters be the characters in the room when the midnight entity jumps on his back. Just so deeply obvious, and I really hated it. All that being said, once we actually get into the station and we see the little setups of like, ooh, the mirrors are broken, everyone's dead, and then we meet Alice, oh, this was great. Almost everything about this build-up was fantastic. Seeing that Alice was deaf, I was like, okay, that probably has something to do with it. But I loved that the doctor immediately spoke sign language. All the rest had to use speech to text. And that became part of the plot in some ways too, in terms of the danger. Like, she could not hear them, she could not see their text, and so she wouldn't be looking in the right direction, so they cast someone else. I thought that was very clever, and a very clever use of that. And also I love the doctor pointing out, like, some people are very uncomfortable with sign language if they can't understand it. It makes them feel excluded. And I know the situation is like, it's a dangerous situation, but I like the point being made right up front by the doctor, that like when people feel like they can't understand something going on around them, they feel upset or worried about it. And I thought that was a brilliant, just nice little beat by the doctor there. I also really loved Belinda being able to be a nurse this episode. She's already felt like she's done more nursing than Martha got to do as a doctor, unfortunately, in her time on Doctor Who. I love Martha Jones. She's actually my favorite companion of probably the modern era. I'd have to look at a list, but she's up there. So I love Martha, but she didn't get to necessarily do a lot of doctoring. She did it here and there. Belinda's already got to do more nursing, and I really like that. I really like that coming up over and over again, especially since it's in the future and she doesn't even know how to run a med pack, and yet she's still trying, and she's still trying to learn. Thought that was really wonderful. Loved all of that. Also, the build-up with her seeing something right behind Alice's back was so creepy. And I loved how it startled everyone. We got little builds up to it. It was legitimately fantastically creepy. And I was like kind of on the edge of my seat of like, ooh, this is, oh, people can't see. And as we got to the moment where the one trooper was lining up right behind her back and then it throws her, I was like, whoo, okay, so cool. That is awesome. Like, every little bit of that was mwah. Couple little things before I get to the big thing. I've already mentioned it, obviously, but I will get to the big thing in just a moment. Just a couple little things that I really loved. I love the doctor pointing out that the person there could be the survivor and the killer. That was just a great doctor line of him having empathy, even knowing that, like, this thing might be, what we might encounter might be a killer, but we still should also know it as a survivor. Could be both. Again, very doctor able to be empathetic, like more empathetic than the people around him generally are. I really love that. I also like that the troopers don't have names besides the head one. There's some implications of some like sort of fascist-y stuff going on there. I enjoyed that. Not that I enjoyed the fascism, just that I enjoyed the implications of the society that they were from. It kind of made it feel a little bit bigger in the simplicity of it. And then Alice herself, I'll just say this up front, she really, the actress just really makes me feel for her throughout all of this. I really felt like when she was terrified, I understood why she lied to them. Like, she didn't tell them, or not even lied, like didn't tell them the full truth about something being behind her, because she just wanted to get off. She wanted to see her kid. When at the end where she's worried about what's going to happen to her, she says, what about my daughter? I bought all of that. Like, could have been a very cliched character. And she like performed it so well. I think she was the standout of this episode by far. In terms of the acting department, even outshining Belinda and the doctor. I thought she was just very, very wonderful, and I have to give all the props to her. Okay, let us talk about the thing that everyone's probably going to be talking about, which is that there's the reveal of this thing that we're dealing with here being the Midnight entity from the episode Midnight. I have very mixed feelings about this for a few reasons. First and foremost, I really liked that in the original Midnight, it was a creature that the Doctor did not get to beat, did not get to know, and could not figure out. You know, the Doctor should be beating all the things 99.9% of the time, but there's a couple times he doesn't, and you get these moments, you get this sense that the universe is bigger and more mysterious, and even the Doctor, who has been around for eons, is older than anybody around, has more knowledge than anybody around, and even he doesn't always get to know every single thing that's going on in the universe, and because of that, it beats him sometimes. And that was the joy of Midnight for me. And having it come back here and having it get technically not beating if we take the ending, but like getting a moment to get a one-up on it in a way that he didn't necessarily do before, I feel like undercuts it. And I think that it's cooler if it's just a one-off thing and it never comes back. And I think bringing it back kind of undercuts the sense of mystery that it brought with it. And on top of that, when you bring it back, it's not even doing necessarily the same thing. We get a similar style of thing, which is the paranoia thriller, but it's not stealing people's voices. It's a thing on someone's back. It kind of reads more to me like that bug from Turn Left that Donna had on her back. Obviously very different, but it has a similar vibe to that. And so it's like, why bring back an entity to undercut some of these other things? Like, if you're going to undercut those elements that I liked about how Midnight played out, build upon what you built before. And so, yes, it's doing something new, but not in a way that builds upon what came before and doesn't, I think, add enough new to what the first one was saying or was doing to that it's worth the price of undercutting what came before. Now, some people I'm sure will argue that bringing the Midnight Entity back did build upon some things. For the Doctor, like, certainly has a personal vendetta with it. He has a personal fear of it. And there are a couple beats that I liked at the end when the Doctor stopped to look back at it. It says, I want to see it. It's one of those things of like, I didn't get to see it before, so now I want to see it again. I thought that was really great. Especially because they only have seconds, and there's an argument to be made that him going back to look at or stopping to look at it cost them time in terms of them getting out. So there's bits of this that I do like, but I don't necessarily feel like you couldn't have done that with something else and thereby not undercut the other elements of it. I understand some of that's going to be personal taste. There are people who like bringing things back and building things back on stuff. For me, though, especially as I get older, maybe it's getting an older thing, there's parts of me that just enjoys the bigger mystery of stuff. I don't necessarily need everything to connect to everything else. It's that same energy in, like, Star Trek, where it looks like they're going to be doing this, where, we had Trelane from the original series and we had Q from the Q continuum of the Next Generation, and people were like, oh, Trelane's a Q. And it looks like even Strange New Worlds, based on the trailers, I don't know for sure, but like based on the trailers, it looks like they're bringing Trelane back to be a Q quite overtly. But that's been like a pervading fan theory, and also has been in a few of the Star Trek books and novels and stuff. And it's like, that's fun, is like a bit of fanfic, but when you do that sort of stuff, it makes the universe feel small. When it's like, I like that there's just a bunch of weird shit in the universe that doesn't necessarily always get to be explained or needs to be connected to one another. And Doctor Who sort of bringing back this element to be like, ooh, it's connected to this thing, that was a one-off thing, to just build upon it, especially building upon it in a way that doesn't feel like it really layers on top of what came before in an interesting way. It's just like, here's the name recognition and it's doing another thing that's in a similar vein, but it's not necessarily building upon that. It doesn't work as much for me. But again, that's a little bit of a taste thing. So, your mileage may vary, but for me, I didn't love it as much. The one last thing, and this is going to be the last negative that I bring attention to with this comparison to Midnight, and it feels unfair to a degree, because Midnight, I think, is one of the best episodes, not only of like the horror genre of Doctor Who, but just Doctor Who generally. I think it's probably my favorite episode. I would argue it's up there. It's in the contest for it. And the episode itself is making the comparison. So I feel like it's fair. If the show is itself saying, like, look, let's compare this episode to that episode, I feel like it's fair to compare it directly. I try not to do that, but when the show is so directly doing that. And I think the biggest negative of comparison that I can draw between the two is that part of what made Midnight work so well as a paranoia thriller is that every character on that, I forget what they are, on the bus, a space bus, essentially, that they were on, the tour bus, was someone that, like, I understood who they are, and they all felt disparate. They all felt very different. Every character felt very different, and they established them very quickly. And not all of them were, some had more depth than others, not all of them were the deepest of characters, but they all had different personalities that, like, bounced off of each other in interesting ways, that when we got to the paranoia, you could understand why each person had a different perspective on what to do, and that different perspective on what to do ultimately led to the chaos that the Doctor couldn't ultimately control, especially as his own voice was getting taken away from him, which is the one thing the Doctor is always good at, is when he can control a room, and he couldn't here. In this episode, the paranoia works a little less because every character there's no really strong disparate characters. We have Trooper 1, we have Alice, and we have the head, I forget her name, but the head of the troopers. And Alice is certainly well drawn. Trooper 1 is just a flat out nothing burger character that annoyed the shit out of me. And the leader, And she has decent depth. She's not the deepest character, but she is like Soldier Lady. And she gets a little bit more nuance to that. But she is essentially Soldier Lady, and then everyone else is soldier people. And we don't get enough time with them. We get a little shades of here and there, but they're all generally very similar. And we don't give enough of their personality so that when the paranoia stuff happens, we don't get a lot of disparate personalities. We only get like Trooper 1 being an asshat. So it's it just, in the comparison, it doesn't work as well. If this was an episode standing on its own, I wouldn't make the comparison as much. There's certainly been plenty of Doctor Who episodes where there's a lot of cannon fodder, nothing burger characters. But when you're directly comparing to Midnight, which had a bunch of really interesting disparate characters, the distinction stands out for me. That all being said, all right, those are my comparison. Those are the Midnight parts of the discussion. On its own terms, though, there's some stuff that I really enjoy. Again, I've already talked about the paranoia building. I do think the fact that it's literally right behind her back at midnight, as the Doctor points out, is a little too literalizing the midnight thing. But I do like that it's a cool, creepy idea of like, who gets to be behind her at what point? How do we see it? It can't be behind her at all angles. It's sort of like this interesting, like quantum, like flow idea of like, oh, it only collapses into you seeing if you're right behind her. I thought that was very, very cool. And especially at the end when she's like moving around and it's killing everyone behind her and she can't even hear it. And then the leader eventually getting Trooper 1 killed directly because he's a dick. I'm like, hell yeah, it was the right choice to do. He's being an asshat. He was getting people killed. So I thought all of that was pretty excellent. I loved all of that build. I also liked the Doctor figuring out that, like, the reflection. It was a fairly obvious answer, and I like that we didn't, like, take too long to get to it, and we got there. It does make me wish, though, we had more time in the paranoia buildup of it. Like, we got even more of it with even more characters. But still, I enjoyed how it went down. And then we are running through. We're getting out. I've already spoken a little bit about them getting their uniforms on, their suits on, which was bothersome to me. And then I did enjoy the ending where it is on Belinda and the Doctor says, come to me. And it kind of feels like a lead into the promise of, like, I will make sure you get back. And an interesting breaking of his promise that he said he would dance with her family. So it's already sort of showing that, like, he promises these things, but he can't always guarantee them. And it works out, so we still may get to fulfill that promise. But it's already sort of undercutting him a little bit that he was willing to do that, and it would technically break the promise that he made earlier, that's saying he would dance with her family and everything, bring her back to Earth. So I enjoy that subtle bits there. That's some fun little complications that I enjoy to that part of this. Actually, as I was editing, there's one other point with this that I did want to draw attention to. And this is something that my friend Vera Wild over on her channel, Council of Geeks, pointed out in her review of last week's episode, Lux. And it's, why do these entities follow rules? We got with Lux last week that the Light Pantheon god followed specific rules that the Doctor forced him to follow, but as Vera pointed out, that was a Toymaker thing, not necessarily a Pantheon thing, so it felt a little bit weird. And while the Midnight entity is not part of the Pantheon, here, the Doctor directly calls out that the Midnight entity likes to play games, and that the Midnight entity doing this clock thing, the whole reason it's doing this clock thing is to play another game, to just fuck with everybody, essentially. That is what he's doing. It was fucking with people in the first episode we saw, and it's fucking with people now. And that's fine. I actually like that as a concept. It's just an entity that likes to fuck with people because it's that kind of weird Eldritch horror thing. And I think that actually kind of makes it creepier, this idea that, like, it likes to play games with people because it just is messed up like that. That's a cool, creepy, fun idea that's kind of terrifying. So that I don't mind. However, there's this big reveal of, oh, the Doctor is using the mercury behind it to create a mirror, and it's going to see itself, and so it'll be behind itself, and it'll fuck itself up. But I'm also sitting here like, well, maybe that's just part of its biology. We don't necessarily know. But the implication that you've told us is that it's playing games. And so why would it necessarily continue to play the game by the rules if it's going to hurt itself, especially when it's so telegraphed that it's about to do that? Again, you could explain this. I'm not saying that it doesn't work, but the show doesn't necessarily give us the pointers towards that. And so it's one of those things sitting here like, oh, I can headcanon a reason why it would make sense to do so. But if you're going to have the doctor gets the one up on the creature moment for it, it feels like these are holes that you should fill rather than leaving it open, because then it undercuts how clever the doctor is, if that makes sense. Like, if we don't necessarily knows all the terms of engagements that the doctor's playing with, when he finds a clever out or a clever turn, then it doesn't necessarily land as well, because we couldn't have like gamed it out ourselves necessarily, or we would have been like, oh, we could have thought about that, but it's like, oh, why would it do that? Like, you know what I'm saying? It feels like there's a piece missing here that makes the big revelation by the doctor land a little less like, oh, that's what it's doing. Yeah. It just felt a little bit, number one, obvious because we saw the mirrors coming up. And then also at the same time, a little bit like too easy because it doesn't necessarily fit the way the entity has been described to us. Again, presumably by the doctor. So it's not necessarily for sure that it needs to act that way. Maybe it is bound by the rules that it's stated, but we don't necessarily get that laid out. So it's one of those things that just throws me a little bit. Oh, one other thing too, I just want to call out here. There's a moment when the doctor's talking to the Midnight Entity and we're on his face really quick and he's just talking to it. I enjoyed that bit. But I am generally not someone who has been bothered by how much this doctor cries. I know it's been a thing in the fandom of like, ooh, this doctor cries too much. I actually enjoy it. I don't mind the doctor being just a little bit more of a crier than other doctors. That's fine to me. This is the first time though that his crying really felt superfluous to me. Like he's starting to cry when he's talking to the Midnight Entity. I'm like, that's unneeded. That's a little bit much. It was the first. I'm just calling it out because I genuinely am not bothered by that. I usually don't have a problem. This is the first time where it really felt like, why is he crying here? Why now? It's a bit much. And then we get to the end, and I kind of already hinted at this earlier, but with the leader of the team, Shava, I think her name is, something like that. Her taking the Midnight Entity was fine, but there's a logic to me that's a little off. Like, I get Belinda, like, her job is to be the soldier and protect people. But in her mind, to what she knows, Belinda should also technically be that. From her awareness, the doctor and Belinda are also technically both troopers, if above her. But technically both troopers. And maybe she figured out that they weren't. It's not very hard for her to figure that out. But her shooting Belinda means that Belinda might die, and she almost certainly will. And my thinking is like, the calculus of that feels weird, especially for a trooper, to be like, oh, am I going to kill someone who I think is a trooper? Maybe not, maybe. But who I think is a trooper, because I'm going to say this is my job to be a trooper, and maybe endanger, definitely get one person killed and possibly endanger another one, or we just leave one person killed. It's a bit harsh, and it's not necessarily something I would agree with, but it feels like it would fit that character a little bit better, and just the calculus a little bit better. The doctor would certainly not agree with it, but it feels weird coming from her. The other thing too, and so didn't exactly, and the other element too is, I already hinted at this, but her having this big emotional moment of like, I used to run, and again, it just doesn't land because I didn't mind the information that we got about her earlier on that, but like, I didn't care enough about it. It was like interesting, but it wasn't an emotional thing that I'm like, ooh, I'm really attached to that beat for her, that it meant a lot to her. It didn't feel like it even meant a lot to her in the moment. And so this big emotional thing of like her running and flashing back to her as a kid, I'm like, this is trying to wring too much emotion out of this than it already has. And then on top of that, the doctor's running behind her. And theoretically, the Midnight Entity is on her. And he's running behind her. And he literally, we even get a shot from behind her back. The doctor's standing behind her. Shouldn't that have killed him if he was literally right behind her back? That should have gotten him killed. Now, theoretically, at the end of the episode, there's a hint that the Midnight Entity was never on her, and she just sacrificed herself for nothing. So it's possible that that's the case. But there was a moment that, like, if the implication is that it is on her, it feels weird that he's not getting killed. Again, maybe it's foreshadowing what the twist at the end was. Maybe that was the intention, but it reads as a mistake, if that makes sense. Like, it might be intentional for them to be like, ooh, look, that he's not dying, even though he should. That should warn you of something. But in the moment, it reads less as like an interesting clue and more like you weren't thinking this through. And it feels like it could have been done in a slightly better way, if that makes sense. Again, your mileage may vary on that. All right, some other small things. I did love the ending of this, where it's the implications of the Midnight Entity get off the planet, so maybe it'll come back around sometime. Again, I don't necessarily know if I want that, but we've already. Let me put it this way: if I wouldn't have wanted this in the first place to be the Midnight Entity, but now that we've uncapped the cork, whatever, uncorked the bottle, whatever you want to call it, I forget the metaphor. It's like, okay, cool, I'm fine with it coming back at some point. I don't necessarily mind it as much anymore. I would never have done it in the first place personally, but now that we've done it, fine, okay. We also get a few little hints of the ongoing storyline here. Earth apparently never existed, so it's going back to the idea that Earth blew up, probably on the day that Belinda Chandra left. And so what's up with that and how has history changed? Thought that was interesting. Again, it's these little seeds that Russell T Davies likes to poke at. So curious to see where that's going to ultimately go. And then we also get Mrs. Flood again at the end here. Okay, cool. I don't really have enough about her to know. Like, clearly she's aware of when in the Doctor's timeline this is, because she's looking at the Vindicator stuff. So it's like, okay, he's doing Vindicator stuff, so that must mean he's doing this part of his timeline, or she wants him to do the Vindicators for something she's doing. So clearly there's something going on there. There's not enough for me to guess, so it's like, okay, Mrs. Flood's just going to show up at the end of every episode, I guess, or in every episode at some point. Those are the major things. Ruby Sunday's coming back. I was going to say Ruby Tuesday for some reason. Ruby Sunday's coming back next week, so excited for that. But yeah, ultimately, at the end of the day, this was a solid episode, had a couple good moments, but I do believe it does itself a disservice by so directly drawing from a comparison to Midnight and even building upon Midnight in ways that I don't think work for me. And the rest of it feels like, okay, it's solid with one really great guest actor, but for the most part, it's like, this is good, not great, and it doesn't really exceed the sum of its parts. So, yeah, what did you think of The Well? I'd love to hear all your thoughts down below, but beyond all of that, my friends, I hope you live long and prosper.